Hello and welcome to a new episode of ZomCast number 10. In this podcast, we will talk about the common development interview questions that a candidate developer for a job might consider learning about or thinking about before they want to land a position of their favorite interest. So, before we dive into the questions, uh, let me introduce myself. I'm Mehdi, the host of this podcast, and I'm here with my co host Mahmoud.
Hey guys, I'm Mahmoud, I'm co-host.
Very good. And we will start with some common questions that are found over the internet in terms of what background you have had in development and what you are interested in and how you deal with challenges. Of course, we talked about these topics and we talked generally about development interviews and how you might want to approach interviews, how you might get benefits from interviews, not just getting your favorite position of your job and increasing your career and boosting your career. We talked a lot about that, and I thank Mahmoud for sharing a lot of his experience regarding the interviews he has had in the past. But today we are going to talk about specific common development interview questions. And for that, I found an interesting article over the internet on Tech Republic. On Tech Republic, that is called 10 Questions Software Developers Should Expect in a Job Interview. And it's an interesting one. I'm going to share it with you. So, if I share that screen with you, you will see that in a better view and have an idea of what we're talking about. Number one is, what kind of development are you currently doing? So a lot of you that are uh, applying for a job in a company might be already doing some job or some project of your own or for someone else for a previous company or for some third party employer. And you might want to tell a little bit about that development that you are doing, the type of project that you're working on, and probably the challenges you face, the technologies that you are working with in that project. And Mahmoud, what do you think about this question? What kind of development are you doing? How do you face this question? Is it pretty common in development interviews? Because you have had a lot of interviews, and I see it appropriate to ask you this question.
Actually, when I going to interview, I'm just going to that specific company
Oh,
that want my development type, my development language,
mhm.
and yeah, mm, usually they know that I'm a .NET developer, and they don't ask me about other languages,
Mhm.
and yeah.
So this question might not be very popular, might not be very common.
Just maybe it happened for the new developer, junior developer that want to find their first job. Maybe
Mm,
they ask them this question.
right. So there's the description. Employees are looking for a candidate who can clearly outline the set of applications and technology stack they have worked with. Halpin said, I don't know who Halpin is, but maybe someone with good information about these topics. And more than that, they want a potential employee to understand and be able to explain the business reasoning behind those applications. Sounds reasonable. And the number two, tell me about a tough software development problem and how you solved it. So, this is another common question, according to Tech Republic, that you might face. You might want to tell a little bit about a tough problem that you have in your development, probably in the past, and how you face it, how you deal with it, how you solve it. This is a good opportunity for a developer candidate to dig into a software development problem they have faced and how they solved it. Recruiting manager at tech staffing firm Mondo. Show how your collaboration helped make the project successful, because all of software development involves teams. So, uh, how common is this question, Mahmoud?
It's a
Is it
better
pretty
question.
common?
Yeah, it's better question. I ask it sometime when I do an interview. I ask it always.
Oh,
It's very good to find which level is this person
right,
in
right.
development.
So, so I guess you often ask, you give an example, a pretty tricky example, a pretty tricky challenge for them to solve it, or you ask them to give an example of a tricky challenge.
I always ask them to tell me the uh, biggest problems
Oh,
in development.
yeah,
And
seems
in
very
the
similar.
previous year and previous project, and
Hmm.
it's very good question because you can see that level level of you can find the level of him or her.
Right,
uh,
right. Interesting. So,
and sorry, and
no
how
problem.
the part two, how you solve it, and this is very good question because you can see the power of uh, problem solving and the um, how this person solve his or her big problems. It's very useful.
Nice. Yeah. So, number two was a pretty common question that is a very good evaluation criterion for someone applying for a job. And number three, let's see how common is this one. Do we agree with it or not? Can you describe the development methodology that you're familiar with? Honestly, I don't remember much of the methodology in development, and I suppose that many developers don't care about methodology nowadays. I'm not sure about that. Maybe in teams they do. I haven't been in many development teams. So I asked Mahmoud about this. Let's see what he thinks.
Actually, uh, I use Agile methodology, and I'm going to ask some Agile methodology question sometime. And it's popular. It's good if your team bigger, is big, and your team is more than 5 or 6 or more. When your team is big, it's very important to have a methodology. And the current popular methodology is Agile. And yeah, it's a
Interesting.
good question. If your
Interesting.
project is big, it's a good question.
And so this is pretty common. They ask this question a lot in interviews, right?
If someone asks you this question, you can find that their project is a little bit big and your team is a little bit bigger. Yeah, in that team and that project, that type of project is common because you should familiar with methodology like stand-up sessions or a sprint. In Agile, you should familiar with what is a sprint, what is stand-up sessions, what is that sessions. Yeah, and popular in that team.
Oh, I remember these words, agile and or waterfall, from my early college, but
Oh
I didn't face
yeah,
them a lot after that. So you mentioned agile methodology. Can you tell us a little bit about agile so that we can remember a little bit?
yeah, sure. Yeah, and I remember this word, especially waterfall and RUP, when I'm going to university. And I remember, unfortunately, in my university, they teach very old methodology, and I don't like that.
Oh,
I remember I hate that because they use very old methodology like RUP, and that time I'm going to a job, and I knew that nobody used that RUP. RUP is very old, but in my university, our professors teach this old methodology. Yeah, if I want to talk about methodology, I should say there are two big category. One of them is some methodology like RUP that they are a little bit old, and in that methodology uh, you should prepare before starting project. You should prepare everything. You
oh,
should design software before starting developing. Not only design, you should uh, document it, design it, analyze it before starting the project. And it was popular in some years ago, more than 10 years ago in software industry. But nowadays, nobody uses that old methodology.
oh,
And, since 10 years ago, they use uh, some agile methodology. Agile methodology is some mm, suitable methodology because you create a sprint. For example, you create a sprint and create a to-do list, something like that,
hmm,
and you just develop that.
oh,
If new issue,
hmm,
if you receive a new issue or new problem, you don't do that in this
oh,
sprint. And the sprint is a week, is about a week, maybe
oh,
1 or 2 weeks.
hmm,
And in this sprint, this 1 or 2 week, you just do that checklist
oh,
issues. After that sprint, uh, you can decide about new issues or new feature that you want to add it to your software. If I want to describe Agile, it's something like that. And it's against to RUP. It's very different with RUP or the old methodology because you create a part of your software and some after that summarize and thinking about that and talk to the other developers, and after that you start the second part, second
hmm,
sprint.
hmm,
And yeah, there are some special session like stand up, daily stand up. Every day you going to work. Before you start your work, you all developer come together and talk about uh, what they want to do today, what they complete yesterday, and what's their problems or issues. Yeah, just every day they have this stand-up meeting, and after that, every developer going and do their issues and their tasks. And yeah, I tell you to-do list, but it's task list, some
Mm-hmm.
task list.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, something like that. And the software created after some sprint, maybe 10 or more.
Very
After 10
good.
sprint, it's very better than RUP.
Nice.
Because in the RUP, you should do everything before starting the project.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just good on the paper. If you do a software in that methodology, you face with a lot of problem because uh, when you start software, you see a lot of problem that you don't expect them. A lot of problem happen to you, and you don't expect some of them. It
Mm-hmm.
create issue for you. Yeah.
So, Agile, as I concluded and I understood from what you said, the Agile methodology, we can say that divides the problem into smaller parts and then develops those parts separately and then incrementally goes forward, like completing the software. And it's more real life, right?
Yeah,
It's more
exactly.
real life than RUP because RUP uh, assumes a certain thing, assumes the project in a certain way
Yeah.
beforehand, the whole project,
Yeah,
and the real life situations might just change the direction or the
exactly.
course of the project completely, and all those efforts might go to waste, right?
Yeah, exactly. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of problem. It took a long time to prepare everything before starting, and but if you compare it to Agile, you can see that it's you very fast. You start very fast.
Mm-hmm.
Start very fast. Your software.
Yeah. So interesting topic. We might want to talk about software development methodologies in a separate ZomCast. What do you think, Mahmoud?
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this idea. So let's move to the next one. And thank you for your good statements on number
You're welcome.
three. It was very useful. And number four, tell me about the time you had a conflict with another employee. Oh my God, I hate this question. And I hate this, this phenomenon because in every workplace, probably it's quite possible that you have a conflict with another employee. You have some frictions, you don't know how to deal with it, and it affects your work and affects your mental mental behavior, mental health. I mean, and what do you think, Mahmoud, about this? Is it a quite common question from
Yeah,
employers?
it's quite common.
Do they ask this question?
Yeah, yeah, and I ask it always.
Oh,
It's because in the interview you want two category. One of them is what uh, the first one is his or her skills. The second one is personality.
mm-hmm.
This question help us to find the personality and uh, personality type. Yeah, and it's very useful.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, uh, what is the ideal way to deal with conflicts with another employees? And for example, if I'm an applicant for a job in your company and I want to be employed in your company, and my technical skills are good, now you ask me about this. How do I deal with other employees, and how uh, what do I do if I have a conflict with another employee? I don't like him or her, and how do I cooperate with them? Uh, yeah, what should I respond? How should I reply to get your attention for this job?
Ah, good question. Uh, for me, Honestly, for me, it's not matter what is the
Idea.
type. No, what's the his or her personality type.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are
Introvert
introvert,
and some
yeah, introvert.
extrovert.
Some of them are extrovert, and it's based on the interviewee. I usually prefer uh, to hear the major solution for solve the conflict,
Mm-hmm.
like talking about that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's happened in every team. It's normal. Then they just want to see your personality type, and you should be honest. Talk about your experience, and the best solution is talking to. In the first step, you should talk to that person about the conflict and try to solve it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not solved, you can talk to your CTO or your manager or your Scrum Master or your boss. And yeah, and it's happened a lot. You just should be honest and talk your. Sometimes it's not your fault. The conflict
Right.
happen and it's not your fault. And I prefer to suggest people to be honest and talk about the what happened in the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Right. So, pretty important question.
yeah,
And as Mahmoud said, you and we, everybody looking for a job and to be a good candidate for a job should have a mature solution for this type of conflicts that is pretty common and happens in almost every team. So we skip number 5. Uh, um, it's probably about quality assessment process or something like that. It's not quite popular as far as I can think of. We move to number 6. What is your process to test and find bugs in an application? And nowadays, because software is pretty big and software projects are quite big in almost every company, I think that this is very important. Testing and finding bugs. And you might not realize the importance of this unless you work in a big team. What do you think, Mahmoud? Do you agree with this?
yeah, exactly.
Is it a good
And test,
question?
yeah, very good question. Because testing is very good process, very important process, and yeah, it's very important.
So, do you get asked this question a lot? And do you ask this question from your candidates if you are the interviewer?
Actually, it's a job title. Software tester. It's
Oh,
job
really?
title. Yeah. And
Someone is
nowadays,
responsible solely
yeah,
for
just
that.
yeah, someone nowadays there is a job title that we call it software tester.
Oh,
They just their responsibility is testing software, and I think it's better to hire special tester, and it's better because the test is very important and you should do it a lot. It's better
mm-hmm.
to hire some software tester
Right,
separately. Yeah.
right. We might also have another separate episode about software testing because it's pretty important in my opinion,
Yeah,
and I
sure.
think it makes a good title for an episode. And what do you know about object-oriented programming and object relational mapping? And as you can imagine, this is very popular object-oriented programming. Everybody talks about object-oriented programming, and everyone that has had some experience in development has at least heard about an object-oriented programming language like C++ and Java, and more recently Python. Even Python has a lot of good object-oriented programming features. So one of the popular questions according to this article is your knowledge about object-oriented programming. And if the employer wants to get really mean to you and ask hard questions, and I think that you might have some challenges because object-oriented programming has some special tricks, especially Java. If you do Java programming, it has what do they subtleties. It has a lot of subtleties and small tricks and small tips that you need to keep in mind, like inheritance, in terms of inheritance, interfaces, and other topics. So in short, this is another question that is pretty common. Let's see what Mahmoud thinks about it. Is it really important and common?
Yeah, it's really important, and I think it's most popular question in interviews. Yeah, and they ask it a lot. It's a very good subject to create very complicated questions.
Oh yeah.
And if you want to finish it and don't let to interviewee to ask you some complicated question, you can answer it with a advanced level of that. If he asks you about object oriented, you can answer it with a spatial design pattern. And when you talking about design, something like design pattern, he found that you are very good and good knowledge in object oriented, and it's very good trick, because if I sometimes I ask some object oriented question, if they answer me that, I skip this part and don't answer more question about this. Yeah, and they ask me a lot, and I do this trick in my interviews sometimes, because as I told you, I'm going to interview a lot, and they ask me this, always ask me these questions, and sometimes I'm bored and I answer with some advanced topic to tell them that I know this topic, you can go into next topic.
Very good. Very good strategy to deal with this question. So guys, we're running out of time, and I think that we covered almost all of the important questions that are pretty common in development interviews. Number 8 is, what obstacles have you run into in a software development project, and how did you deal with them? It is a little bit similar to another question that we faced already. It was number 2, I think. No, number 2. Yeah, number 2. And 9, are you working on a passion project?
Oh yeah, it's good.
Is it good question? And is it popular? Do you ask that question yourself?
I ask this question, but it's not very popular.
It's not very popular. Yeah. They might ask to assess some aspects of their personality and how passionate they are about development, right?
Yeah. It's not related, but I just want to suggest all developer that hear my voice to have some passion project. It's very joyful, and it help us to improve our skills. And I love this project. Some people call it hobby project.
That's right. That's right. A good question then. What are your career aspirations? So this is the last one, and we can skip that, about probably your aspirations and your ambitions for future in terms of development and your job. So thank you everyone for listening up to this point. Let's finish the podcast with some latest developments and latest pieces of news in software industry. Uh, let's start with this. Developer survey finds JavaScript remains the most popular programming language. I just found this in internet forums. I don't remember exactly where, but it's an interesting thing to know. It was interesting for me, at least. JavaScript still the most popular programming language today. And the other uh, piece of news, Huawei brings up Huawei Docs to replace Microsoft Office and Google Docs with some new technology called Huawei Docs. And let's see what happens and how they do it. And it's a quite big thing if they do it, because Microsoft Office and Google Docs is huge. And this is, you can find this and the article about that on TechRadar. And the last thing, Docker to implement pull rate limits. So up to today, so far, Docker allowed you to pull as many images every day that you needed, that you wanted, uh, when you were logged into your repository and to your account. But as of today, and as of the publication of this announcement from Docker, you uh, faced with some limits, some pull rate limits. And according to the post that in which they announced the limits, if you want to put it simply, if you are an authenticated user, you can get about you can get 100 polls every 6 hours. Okay, and if you are logged into your account, you can pull 200 images every 6 hours. So if you are an anonymous user, you can pull 100 images every 6 hours, and if you are logged in, you can do 200 images every 6 hours. And this is important for, this might be interesting for Docker lovers and developers nowadays that are moving to Docker. And the article of the week that I hope you like, why living with and tending plants is good for you. And this is a pretty good article on bbc.com. And for nature lovers and plant lovers and everyone who wants to improve their life and quality of their life, this is a good recommendation. Why living with and tending plants is good for you. So thank you again, everyone, for listening to this podcast. I hope that you liked it. Thank you, Mahmoud, for helping me in this podcast. If you liked the video, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and subscribe to our channel. And let us know what you think of the podcast and how we can improve it and the topics that we might bring up. Thank you again, and stay safe. Goodbye.